So in this question, we are given this as the front and the plan. So we're going to convert it into isometric. So doing the first one first. So putting the sketch and getting all the dimensions. So these are its getting to at the end of the day. So we're going to go through the procedure one after the other. You can see the sketch over there. So at the point A, which means this is what we are doing, the lower one. So we firstly start with an horizontal line. So we start with an horizontal line, horizontal fence line. Then we mark a point. So with that point, we are going to take our protractor. So putting it at the point, making sure it's on the line, we are going to mark 90 degree, 30 degree to the left, and 30 degrees to the right. Then we join it together with our ruler as fence line. So since the point is taken from A, so that means we are going to start from point A, then we take it upward till we get all the necessary sides of this isometric projection. So first of all, we have a distance from A to the left and from A to the right. So to the right, I take 20 and 25, that's 2 centimeter. Then from the 2, another 2.5, so that everything is 4.5. Then to the left, I take 8.8 centimeters, as you can see there. Then vertically upward, trying to check if the dimension will be okay. Now vertically upward, I take 13.4 centimeter to get the total height of the structure there. Now, from each of these points, I will now take my ruler being on the horizontal line. Then my set square to the ruler. I get the vertical line from that 8.8, then vertical line from the 2, and vertical axis from the other 2.5. As you can see, all lines are vertical. Then I make use of my set square, not with my ruler, but with my set square and ruler, making sure the ruler is on the line. Now, at this point, the ruler on the line, at the 13.4, so I want to get the right isoplane from the 13.4 and the left isoplane from the 13.4. So I extend that line upward from that 13.4 with my ruler. Then I try to extend the other point also with also the left isoplane. I also join and I extend that fence line so that we can get that top there. Now my ruler still being on the line, I try to get another line. So I try to get another line of the first horizontal line. So when I now put my ruler on the line, the two lines are parallel. Now I put my set square there to get my right isoplane from this point here. So even though my paper, I didn't actually take the measurement, so when you want to draw it, take it downwards a little. But that up there will intersect. Now this part we have 2 centimeters. So from here, from that 2.5, I mark 2 centimeters up. From the 2, I mark 2 centimeters up also. So placing my ruler on the line and my set square, I use it to join the two together as fence line. Then that's right axis. Then for left axis from the 2, I get the other one also, as you can see from the diagram. So from here, I firstly take my pencil and my thick line to get the shape that I have already. So I join the necessary side that I have based on my sketch. So I join them together as thick line as I continue to the other parts of the diagram. So I join them as thick line, as you can see there. So joining the horizontal also, the other part, the inclined lines, I join them together so that we can know what we have in the diagram and what is left for us to be done. So after getting each of these parts, then we now go to the other side of this diagram, that circular part. Now this circle in isometric projection is no more a circle, it's now an isocircle. So I call it an isometric circle. And for us to get it, first of all, we are given the distance downward to be 4.4 so that we can get the midpoints of it. To get a circle, you must have a midpoint. Same thing applies here. So 4.4 also, that's half of 8.8. So 4.4 downwards, then 4.4 inwards. So I now take my set square. So firstly, my left isoplane passing through the 4.4 at these 2 points. The essence of this is to get the midpoints to get our isocircle. And as you know, a circle starts from a point. So this one also will also start from a point. But for us to get an isocircle, the first step is for us to get a square of that same diameter. So within that square, so which I call an isosquare, it will now help us to get an isocircle within it. Although there's a procedure for getting that. Now the diameter, the full diameter of the circle there is 64, which you can see there. So if everything is 64 at that base, half of 64 is what, 32. So I'm going to take 3.2 from each of these points, from these points, left and right, up and down. So 3.2, then 3.2. So what did I do? I just put 3.2 at the points. So I marked 0 and 6.4. I did the same thing. I put in 3.2 there. I marked 0 up at 6.4. So that means between the points to one other point there is 3.2. Total being 6.4. So I put my set square on my ruler on the line, my set square there. So I first get vertical from the 3.2 left and right. So I try to adjust it a little better. So vertical from the 2 up and down, passing through the points. Then my left isoplane from the other one, that from the 3.2 up and from the 3.2 down, my left isoplane. Now this gives me an isosquare. So this is the square now, which I'm going to make use of. Now I've joined the longest diameter. That's the first procedure for getting an isocircle. Longest diagonal rather. Now the shorter diagonal to the midpoints of the two opposite sides, which you can see there. The shorter diagonal to the midpoint. We already have the midpoint there of that side. Now I will now take my compass of the radius of the shorter diagonal to the midpoints. I will join it as thick circle, but initially I make it faint. Later I will join it thick. Now the shorter diagonal now, where the shorter diagonal intersects with longer diagonal, that's the second radius, which you can see there. Next, I try to get the other parts, but now this other part is, there's a distance of elongation there, which is 64. So I take my right isoplane to extend the midpoints downwards. So my left isoplane to extend the midpoint downwards. Now from that midpoint, distance is 64, so I'm going to mark out a point of 6.4 from the midpoint I used to get my first square. So this point now is a point of 6.4. So from this point of 6.4, I'm going to get my vertical line, my 4 lines also passing through it. So I first get the vertical now. I get the vertical line passing through the point of 6.4. Then I get my right or left isoplane rather. My left isoplane passing through that same point. So this will now help me to get the two circles that I need at these front parts. Now the bigger one is 50, diameter of 50, that's radius of 2.5. So I mark 2.5, I put 2.5 there, then I mark 0 and 5 on the left isoplane. Then on the vertical, I put 2.5 there, then I mark 0 and 5 also. So the distance between the two is 2.5 and 2.5 each. Now, just like I did in the former one, I will also put my ruler on the line, then my set square too. So when I put my set square, I get vertical through the 2.5 at the left, vertical through the 2.5 at the right. Don't mix up the points and don't mix up the line. So vertical to the 2.5 at the right. Now my left isoplane from 2.5 up, then my left isoplane from the 2.5 down, which you can see there. Now the next thing is what? Join the longest or diagonal. You can see the square I have there. So not mixing it up, the square that I'm going to need. So I joined the shorter diagonal. Okay, this is what I did first here. Joining the shorter diagonal. I take my compass. Now this one where I join the full isocircle. Now see how it's done. Shorter diagonal with the midpoints. Draw an arc that intersect the two. Make it thick. Then now the other points of the shorter diagonal, you can see it there accurately. It will also intersect with the two sides also. Now to get the other one, now the longer diagonal, not that place. Now the square, yeah, which is these points. You can see the points I mark where it's making the square. So the longer diagonal. Now where the longer meets with the shorter diagonal, with the edge of one midpoint. So that's the radius we take for the second one. Then the other one also, the midpoint also downwards there. like the same where it's also meeting there. That's the midpoints. We get the lower parts. So that's an isocircle. That's what we mean by an isocircle. You can see not just the circle, it's an ellipse. So I try to join the tangential to each other. So I take this part again to be thick, taking the radius that I take earlier here to be thick, as you can see. Then taking the smaller one here between that point and the edge there, so that that place can become a curve. Then the same radius from this midpoint to this place. So I take an arc there also and make it thick. So next, I take my ruler tangential to that arc. That place we don't need a full isocircle. So that place now we now have that. Now what next? We need to get the one at the center. There's another circle in the middle to show that there's a hollow part that passes through the structure going inwards or through. So that's what we're going to do next in this part. So this is an isometric projection. So the first thing is to get our figure from the point A. Then we take it upward until we get everything needed from the sketch. Now for this middle circle, the diameter is 26, radius is 13. So that's 1.3 now. So just like to get our second square, so 1.3. So we are taking 1.3. So from the midpoints, same midpoint, 1.3 up, 1.3 down. So that like 1.3 at the point, that's 1.3, then 2.6. Same thing here. So 0, then 2.6. 1.3 being at the points. So we put our ruler on the line, same construction line, our set square, vertical from the 1.3 at the left, then vertical from the 1.3 at the right. Then also, what next? Yes, left isoplane from the 1.3 up, then left isoplane from the 1.3 down. You can see that we have another square within there, which you can see accurately. So join the longer diagonal. Then what next? Shorter diagonal to the two opposite sides, midpoints of the two opposite sides, which you have there. Take your radius, shorter diagonal to the midpoint of the opposite side, join it together, which we have. The same radius to the other diagonal, shorter diagonal. It also intersects with the two midpoints there. Now take the intersection between the longer diagonal and the shorter diagonal, which is that place. We join it to. Don't use the former one, use the new one, the new circle. The same thing that works also. Then we also join these parts two together. So this gives us the shape we need. Now my fence line are not supposed to be as thick as this. I just did that so that you can easily see them in the construction. But even at the end of the day, I try to erase them out so that your main drawing stands out. So the fence line has to be, it will be there, but not too visible. So I put my dimensions for the sake of understanding. So we have the vertical, the total height, the total length, then the diameter of each of the hollow parts. So this is how we convert orthographic projection to isometric